a life cycle or an event that we really should attend to.
May I say something, Rabbi, about Burt Bacharach? I have, may he rest in peace. I'm sad that he passed away, 94 years old, and I'm a singer. I always wanted to meet him, and I have the record collection. One of the members of the temple gave me of songs that he never got in public, and an album too. But I just love him so much. May he rest in peace.
Thank you. I see Fern. Hi, Fern. Good morning. Good Shabbos. I see Natalie now in her own identity. Okay. I want to start off with where we're not going to be studying. On page 480 in the Plout, 480 in the Plout, there is a line, verse 15, 2015.
Chapter and verse, Rabbi?
Exodus 20:15. 480 in my Plout. Lynn, would you please read all of verse 15?
All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the blare of the horn, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they fell back and stood at a distance.
Okay, this is one of my most favorite lines in Torah. And please tell me why. I mean, besides the fact that I'm strange and I like things I shouldn't like, what's good here? Why is this such a rich sentence in our Sedra? Risa.
They witnessed the thunder.
Okay, the word witness is a translation of a word that doesn't even come close to witness. The actual Hebrew, v'chol am ro'im, and let's let the Torah speak its language. The Torah says the people saw the thunder and the lightning. Okay, so that's the first thing, and we're going to talk about this, Donna.
It says all the people. So I think that's sometimes interpreted to mean all the people in the past, future, all Jewish souls were witnessing this.
Super. In other words, Natalie's, you got a thumbs up for your mother. I love when that happens. Oh, that was good. Okay, so the claim that every Jew who would ever live stood at Sinai. Every Jew who would ever live witnessed Sinai. And that includes those who convert to Judaism. That includes everybody. So there you have the word all, and it's a simple word, but there are books written about that all. Okay, all the people saw. Help me a little bit because, again, I have to assure you, many medieval philosophers wrote loads of books on this. How did they see the thunder? How did they see the thunder? What would you like to come up with here? How did that happen? I think that's a good answer so far.
I have another question.
Okay, but it's perplexing. It is perplexing. How did the people see a sound?
Well, you could see the manifestation. I mean, things move, you feel, and you see that. Yeah, you actually can see the results of the thunder.
I would like to suggest, among other things, that I don't want to judge it. I'm not judgmental. I'm so easygoing.
Is that true, Risa?
I made a mistake on Friday,
Yes, you did.
Uh-oh.
and Risa threw a quote at me from the women's commentary. And I didn't like the quote in particular. I thought it was borderline not accurate, but she threw it at me.
Uh-oh.
And I reacted inappropriately. So I have to apologize to the
Publicly.
group.
Aw.
I think I said there's a worm entering the fruit
In my home.
in my home. And I think I should not have said that because I have not eaten a thing since that day. So it's a problem. Okay, so
Troy.
I apologize.
Thank you. Accepted.
Okay, that was
You're a
sweet.
sweet couple.
Okay, now there is a neurological phenomenon in which some people hear colors. And that's a very strange thing. When they look at a color, they get a sound.
Mm.
There are other kinds of neurological issues in which numbers can appear as colors. That's just a fascinating thing. It really does happen. When the person affected by this sees a 4, maybe they see crimson. I don't know. And their relationship to the number is through color. The point being only that the distinctive functions of our senses are not 100%. They do cross over, they do different things. And secondly, seeing to me is experiencing. And I could be happy mistranslating ro'im as experiencing. The people experience the thunder and the lightning. And then you can do all kinds of additional midrash on that. But the people saw the thunder and the lightning.
Mhm.
And it says, and the sound of the shofar. And the English doesn't make that clear. They witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the blare of the horn. Once again, they saw the blare of the horn. Okay? Very, very interesting stuff. And the Smoking Mountain. Now, the last part is also extremely important in Jewish theology.
You fell back.
Philosophy. What does that last part say? Vayanu vayamdu merachok. And vayanu means they moved all around. It's kind of like they were twitching. They moved around. The English says they fell back. And that's okay. That's okay. They went moving, vayamdu merachok, and they stood far away. Why did they do that?
I was scared.
Good. They were scared. What else was happening? They were scared. They were overwhelmed.
They had no idea what was happening.
They were confused. Everything. Remember, there's something that I've raised in this group a number of times. It is dangerous to get too close to God. Please understand that. the people who get too close to die often experience what we call death. They don't survive. Moses was able to, Aaron was able to. What did God say to Moses regarding the people before Moses went up on Sinai? Tell the people to stand away from the mountain. Just don't go. Donna? Okay. Yeah, all right. So you're gesturing. Fine. Mysticism is a primary example of the dangers and the rewards of people seeking to get close to God. In the book 3, which will probably be published before the end of this millennium, book number 3 has my chapter on Shabtai Tzvi. And Shabtai Tzvi was so deeply involved in Kabbalah and in mysticism, and the descendants, theoretical descendants of Shabtai Tzvi, like Jacob Frank and others, some of them went totally crazy. It is dangerous to get close to God. Now, how do we exemplify that? For example, in the Catholic Church and in the Reformed Synagogue. How do we do that? We make the pulpit a place where people shouldn't go. Okay? In the Catholic Church, you can get so far up to the altar, and that's it. In the Reformed Synagogue, not of today, but of 20 years ago and before, there was an austere separation. People don't go. One of the most significant places to see that is in the Greek Orthodox Church. They have real limits as to who can go up on the bema. They don't call it a bema, but the bema. It is dangerous to get too close to God. Okay, that's why I wanted to look at this. Verse 15 is in our Sedra and a very important verse. Any comments before we return to what we're going to be studying? Merle?
Okay.
Pardon?
So why in today's world have our bemas gone, if that's a plural word, gone closer to the community where we're all part of it?
Merle, have you noticed that I've become a cynical old man? Have you noticed that difference? Let me indicate to you that the desacralization, that's a word actually, the desacralization of the bema parallels the diminishing belief of people in God.
Okay.
Now that is a crotchety old man's statement.
May I ask a question? Have my hand up.
I find it kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, really.
Well, I wasn't celebrating.
I know.
Yeah,
Can I disagree?
no.
I disagree.
All right, Steve, disagree, but do it politely. I'm feeling
Oh, very
vulnerable.
polite. I think in some ways it's the opposite, and it's not just that we're community, but we can all be closer to God if we're together. That, the clergy, I mean, you may not like this, but you may not be so special that you get to be up there and we don't. It's all together we seek God as a community. and having clergy and congregation more as a unit can facilitate that.
Okay, do you see, Merle, what's happening? Okay, you get that? You know,
Oh, I get it.
okay, you have to kick the clergy around. What I remember in Jerusalem at Kol HaNeshama, the Friday evening Reform, we went to services Friday evening to the major Reform congregation in Jerusalem. And then Saturday morning, I went to services to an egalitarian Orthodox service. So I always had an interesting Shabbos blend. In the meanwhile, I remember the time when the senior rabbi at Kol HaNeshama had a grandchild old enough to crawl around on the bima. And lo and behold, we came there one Friday evening, and there was this very lovely child crawling all over the bima, pulling open the ark curtain and being totally happy. That's when I knew I was getting crotchety. I wanted that space to be just a little different. And I couldn't say anything because most of the people there were ooh and ah and oh and what the heck. I wasn't going to fight the whole city of Jerusalem. But don't get too close to God. It's dangerous unless you don't deal too much with God. Effie.
Is getting close to God, are you talking physically or emotionally or theoretically? Which closeness?
I appreciate the scientific question, and I'm probably going to answer, Effie, all of the above. All of the above. That is to say, in the mystical world, getting close to God emotionally is the thing, okay? Getting too close to God intellectually, getting close to God physically is pretty tough, okay? So let's wipe that one out. But there is a sense of a physical barrier. That is to say, God's space is the temple. God's space is the ark. God's space is the bima. And God loves rabbis more than anybody else. No. But, okay. But thank you for the question, Effie. I think it everything but physical. Susie. Susie?
She muted?
Yes.
Susie, are you mute?
Yes. Okay, and now I'm not muted, right?
Right.
Okay. If you, in the bulletin this week, when Cantor Shapiro Kareth wrote her beautiful composition to us, she mentioned her husband and music. He's now a music professor. I don't know if you read this. And he knew in a particular class that he had, the professor played chords and said, now this is chartreuse, fine chartreuse. This is blue, this is green, and whatever. There's, in music, there's a science. She mentions it in her in her composition, that the music you can see colors.
Mhm.
Yes, that is real. I'm going to take Donna a quick question.
I was just gonna say, in music you can see colors. That's why there was a rainbow over my car. I mean,
Yeah.
literally. And also, I want to say, it says God inhabits the praises of His people, and that He encompasses everything. He's everywhere, but our natural eyes don't see Him. But I think He's closer to us than we are to Him.
Okay. All righty. Now we're going to start by going into Exodus chapter 19, verse 1.
Rabbi, can I?
Exodus
One
19,
page.
Exodus 19, verse 1. And
Rabbi,
those of us familiar with the Sedra of Yitro
Page.
know that the 10 Commandments began on chapter 20. Okay? So when you go to chapter 19, you know that you're doing the lead up to the 10 Commandments. In my flout, it's 473. 473.
Thank you.
412 in WRJ.
Okay. Now, verse 1. On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone forth from the land of Egypt, on that very day, they entered the wilderness of Sinai. They went from Rephidim, they went to Sinai and camped in the wilderness in front of the mountain. In front, it's a wonderful Hebrew. It's almost Bubarian. The Hebrew says neged, over against the mountain, right? They were confronting the mountain. Now, sounds like a simple thing. Actually, we don't know with absolute certainty the exact date of the giving of Torah. We have settled upon the date, which is the festival of Shavuot, right? That's the date we celebrate as the giving of Torah. But there is enough confusion in chapter 19 to make it less than 100% certain what day they got Torah. And not only that, what Torah did they get? To me, very interesting. What Torah do the Israelites get when Moses shinnies up Mount Sinai twice and then eventually comes back with stuff? What does Moses bring? Come on, you got the picture. What does Moses bring?
Tablets.
Tablets.
But did they have just the 10 Commandments, or did they have everything on it?
Okay, it's like Big Pharma was there on Mount Sinai. Moses went up and got 2 tablets. That's great. Okay, now.
Well, Rabbi, aren't there really 2 questions? What did Moses get? And what did he share with the people immediately when he came down?
Oh, Steve, it's more than 2 questions.
Okay.
Those are questions. And yes, they're important questions, but there's a whole bunch of questions. Moses brings down the tablets. On the tablets were written the 10 Aseret HaDibrot. I don't want to run into trouble with Risa again. Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 statements.
I have a comment.
Please, Arthur.
It is not only the 2 tablets that he brought down. He had a magnificent set of history in his mind that he brought down. I believe what it is in Torah, it is God's telling, but perception of Moses. He brought down what he perceived. It might be 100% correct. It might be partially correct.
I actually love what you said, Arthur. Moses brought down his perception. I like that. As a matter of fact, I may use it and not mention you.
You're right.
Moses brought down his perception of the encounter. But folks, when we say that Moses, Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kehilat Yaakov, this is the Torah commanded to us by Moses, right? Well, on Mount Sinai, the best we get are the 2 tablets. The best we get are the tablets of stone in the Ten Commandments. And you know there are two sets of tablets. We're not going to go there. But every time Moses went into the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, during the 40 years wandering in the desert, tradition tells us that Moses received more and more segments of the Torah, so that by the time the Exodus journey through the wilderness was completed, Moses had the complete Torah. You understand that that's not a belief I hold, but that's the way the rabbis described at Sinai, tablets, 40 years in the desert, the plenum, the complete, the package of Torah, all of it. Then there's more. Because I would never say that rabbis are self-serving. I would never say that. But I will tell you that the rabbis in the Talmud went out of their way to elevate their position in the world. They went out of their way. They arrogated to themselves the right of interpretation. They created at the very beginning of the Mishnah God spoke to Moses, Moses spoke to Joshua, Joshua spoke, the men of the great assembly, to the judges, to the prophets, to the rabbis.
Oh,
I'm sorry? They put themselves in the direct line of revelation from Moses. Okay? And this is to guarantee their power and position as the official expositors of Torah. Now, therefore, please, someone give me a one sentence on what is the oral law. Please, one sentence. What is the oral law? I see Donna waving. Okay. Donna?
It's all the stuff that God whispered in Moses's ear, but never got actually written down on anything. And we need the rabbis to let us know what that was.
Yes, I love the phrase that begins, "We need the rabbis." Anything that follows is good. Now, the oral law, by definition, is law that is not written in the Torah. It's not the written law, it's the oral law. The oral law consists of expansions, explanations, and additions and changes to the written law. Finally, the oral law will be written down, and it became the Talmud. But that's not the end of the oral law. According to how rabbinic teachers teach today, the oral law is still being dictated out. It's still happening. The
Oral law
continues to grow. It is what gives Judaism the flexibility as a religion of law to survive for 2,500 or 3,000 years. Because, for example, simple, is Hanukkah in the Torah? No. But we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Hanukkah. Where? It doesn't say that in the Torah. Who has sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles. Fine. But that's oral law. There is a hierarchy. And in rabbinic argumentation, if you try to prove something by quoting the oral law, and somebody throws at you a quote from the written law, that person wins. Okay? Written law trumps oral law. Okay, I see Arthur and then a couple of the questions. We have stuff to go on. This is really basic, good stuff. Arthur?
Whatever you said about oral law is okay, plus what we added into oral law, that what we anticipate, what we wanted to be, but it is not ended. This might be correct or may not be correct. For example, the name or the persons who Cain and Abel married to. It has never said it there. In oral law, it says that the two sons of Adam had a twin, one boy and one girl. The boy married the other's sister. This is oral law. I don't accept it, but I cannot reject it either.
Okay, first of all, what you've done is quote a midrash, not a law. You could fine, but it's part of the oral tradition. Point number one, Moses, according to every rabbinic scholar, received not only the written law at Sinai, and I have to add, and through the desert wandering, but Moses received all of the oral law as well. So that the presence of oral law is an unveiling of what was already revealed in the desert. Did that make sense to you? The oral law is an unveiling of what was already revealed. Moses got the Torah and all of the exposition, all of the additional stuff, so that deciding what enters the oral law, which is Arthur's question, is deciding what is authentic. Shabtai Tzvi took Tisha B'Av, which was his birthday, and he made it a public celebration and not a day of mourning. He attempted to change that part. Now, Tisha B'Av obviously is not in the Torah, right? So he tried to change oral law. And what happened? He was rejected. It lasted for a few generations. There probably are a few thousand Sabbateans in the world today that still observe it, but it didn't work. So, Arthur, the answer to your question is, rabbis teach, rabbis innovate, the community accepts and rejects. It takes time, but that's what happens. So yes, there are things that rabbis teach that are rejected, and other things that become accepted into the corpus. everyone here, I don't want to go over stuff you know. You know She'elot Utshuvot, yes? The responsa literature. You know that. People continue to formally ask rabbis legal questions. That's the she'elah, the question. The rabbi writes a teshuvah, a response. That becomes part of the responsa literature. But Arthur wants to know if every rabbinic response becomes part of the oral law. And the answer is no. Because until a community accepts the teaching of the rabbi, that responsum lies dead. Okay? So you know that there were rabbis in the early 20th century who wanted to move Shabbat for Jews to Sunday. Because that was the day, I mean, the reasons are clear, right? It was America, that's the day, that's when we do this. And I grew up in Cleveland with Abba Hillel Silver. Abba Hillel Silver drew more than 1,000 people every Sunday morning to the temple in Cleveland. Yeah, he would have liked that to be Shabbos. Okay? He wanted that. Others wanted that. It didn't happen because the people rejected that, not by a vote, by practice. By practice. Okay, Steve Miller.
Actually, I was going to talk about the responsa because in different groups, the same question might be answered differently, and both answers might be accepted by various communities. It's kind of bizarre to me that if God is making the law, that the law could be different and contrary to itself.
And I would say to you, Steve, that the law isn't being contrary. The law, the way the rabbis would understand it. Okay, Steve? It's the way they would understand it. The oral law is being revealed. It exists, and the rabbis are revealing it. And sometimes, please don't quote me, rabbis mess up. And what they teach is not what God intended or the people's wisdom. I have to tell you that the Talmud places a very high premium on what the people do. There are times in the middle of big rabbinic arguments, one of the rabbis will say, you know, we're in here in the study house arguing. Why don't we go outside and see what the people are doing? I love that. I mean, that's powerful. That's an innate democracy within Judaism. I'll give you an example. People are bringing their sheep for slaughter, and they have to travel on Shabbat. How can they carry their knife? And one of the rabbis said, why don't you go out and see what the people are doing? Because they're living this. And you know what he saw? People were shoving their knives into the wool of the sheep. And the sheep were carrying the knives. And the people were not violating Shabbat. Go see what the people are doing. They're living this. So, Steve, it's not, they don't understand that as a conflict, it's a clarification. Ray.
Right, so each community, if you have two different interpretations, they just believe their rabbi got it right and the other community hasn't seen the light.
That is absolutely correct. And that remains the tradition in one town and the tradition in another town. And sooner or later, over time, it works out. When Reform Judaism was started, Israel Jacobson and the folks who started the first Reform synagogue, 1810, whatever, there was hell to pay. It was acceptable in one town, and there were riots in many other towns. Yes, Steve. Two divergent opinions could exist side by side in neighboring towns with different rabbis. This is the dynamic flexibility of the oral law. Okay, I see Ray. I really have to move to close. Ray?
Thank you. I did actually have a question on a smaller point, but it's been a lingering question for me and maybe others. The notion of Saturday versus Sunday Shabbat, where in our tradition actually does it become understood that the seventh day equates to our Saturday? How did we even get that understanding to begin with?
First of all, it's very, thank you for a question I can answer. It's set up on the creation calendar, Shavat Vayinafash. Seventh day, God rested, good enough for God, good enough for us. Seventh day is the Sabbath. And it says it in the laws of Shabbat. It says it in the Kaddish. Okay?
If I could just clarify further the question, though, I absolutely understand counting seven, but where is it established that the day that's number one that we start with corresponds to what we now understand as Sunday? The seventh day of what? Who set the counter and said seven lines up with Saturday?
That goes back to pre-Israelite, where I'm not going to be able to give you an answer that I want to stand on. Am I going to say the Babylonian world? Maybe. But pre-Israelite, Shabbatu was the seventh day of the week. It was a day, by the way, of terror, and people should stay home because it's scary. That became, within Jewish tradition, the seventh day of the week, happy. So there is a lineage. Those calendars existed. Every calendar has a beginning date. And the 7-day calendar became quite normative. Okay, Ray?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I always wondered how we get from that to contemporary or more contemporary calendars.
Yeah.
So I appreciate
and
that.
You know that in the Christian world, the only way, and I said this in one of the previous classes, the only way Christians can claim to be observant of the 10 Commandments, which includes the Sabbath commandment, is to declare, despite the fact that it says 6 days I labored, the 7th day I rested, that since the time of Jesus, the Lord's Day is Sunday, and that replaces Shabbat.
Now, for me,
They are Sabbath observe. They are 10 Commandment observers. All they had to do was to totally uproot the Sabbath from the calendar, and then they could observe it their way. All right, I have
Effie
to.
has a quick question.
Who's there? I'm sorry.
Effie.
Okay, Effie.
Yes, you said that they took the knives and had the sheep carry them, but I thought the commandment says the animals also have to rest.
The animals have to rest, but there are no requirements against an animal carrying anything. Animals, the animals should not be worked, but if they're moving or whatever, the animal can carry. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Are you guys gonna miss me? I'm going away for months. But
Okay.
I'll be on Zoom.
Okay, we will look forward to Zoom communication.
Okay.
Okay, that'll be good. There is a rabbinic commentator whom I love. Abarbanel doesn't answer questions. He asks them. So when you go to Rashi, Rashi will go, oh, this is that, and the language, and the, here, and it's found in the Talmud there, and this is in the Old French, this is the word we use. Fine. You go to Ibn Ezra, oh, grammatically, this is how this works, this is how the Hebrew works, this is how it's used in 3 other locations, so this is what it means. We go to Ramban, and he says, the Kabbalah teaches us this is the Kabbalah, this is the fine, I love you, good guy Ramban. You go to Abarbanel, very often he will look at a verse and say, I have 6 questions about this verse. And he will put in, listing it as question 1, question 2, question 3, right out there. And of course, he makes you feel stupid because why didn't you think of those questions when looking at the material? Okay? So Abarbanel does a beautiful job of asking questions. You know what Abarbanel asks here? Question 1. Why did Torah have to be given at Sinai? Couldn't Torah have been given to Adam and Eve in the garden? That's Abarbanel. You know what? That's a good question. Okay. Why was Torah given to Moses? Noah had a real need for Torah, starting the world again. Why didn't Noah get the Torah? The Torah is given in the desert. We have answers for that, Abarbanel says. It's to show that Torah really is the property of all humankind. Terrific. Okay. Abarbanel says, as far as I'm concerned, I don't understand why God didn't give the Torah in Jerusalem. Okay? And sometimes it's just simply delightful to meet this guy and to see how he is looking past the ordinary boundaries of the text. So I would have talked with you about Abarbanel today, but Abarbanel, by the way, points out that Moses only went up on Mount Sinai in the mornings. How he proved that, I don't know. But he has a firm conviction that every time Moses went up on Mount Sinai, it was a morning. Steve, I got to finish quick.
Okay, I was just going to say, but just because he has this question, some of them don't make sense. If the Torah is true, some of it is, it just happened. It's like saying, why isn't the capital of the United States Los Angeles?
It isn't?
I didn't say it shouldn't be. I'm just saying some of the questions, it seems to me, are of that nature. He would have done something different than what happened historically, but that's not really a good question to me.
Okay. Steve, I like people who think a little crazy. I like people who raise questions, some of which are not so great, but, some of which, do you know how the world would have been different if God had given the Torah to Adam and Eve? Okay, hey, that's not a bad question. Or Mount Sinai. It's a relatively not impressive place. Why not give the Torah at Jerusalem? So you could have had more wars in Jerusalem fighting over who owns God's revelation. It could have been very interesting. But yeah, not every question is good. Not every question is worthy. But I have to tell you, when I'm prepping for today's classes or these classes, I always read a Barbanel because one of them is going to pop out at me. Oh, yeah. Why is this but not that? And I love it. I want to mention, for those of us who are formally of University Synagogue, that Jeff Melvoin's mother passed away. And some of you may wish to know that and to respond, okay? Jeff was a very frequent participant in the Chevra Torah and responsible for helping me start it at the very beginning. And
Oh,
okay, so I just thought I would mention that.
thank you. Rest in peace.
Those who have passed away during the past month: Joel Altschul, Muriel Blankfort, Stuart Melvin, Joyce Olin, Michael Rakach, Louis Rosen, Ruth Rosenberg, Tamara Stolarski, Martin Weitz. Your sites that have occurred during the past week: Morris Aber, Fen Abrams, Jack Ader, Constance Enyan, Alvin Apple, Theodore Arnovitz, Morris Askar, Goldie Baker, Tala Benayan, David Saul Bensol, Arnold Bernstein, Rose Bernstein, Hamapun Bina, Bob Blenner, Mildred Borstein, Philip Breitbart, Milton Cohn, Abe Cohn, Elliot Corday, Joel Curry, Jacques Darlin, Sandy Davids, Avishai Davidson, Joan Fetter, Alan Richard Franklin, Clara Fraser, Daniel Gam, Albert Garber, Helen Gelfand, B. Rita Gittleson, Betty Glucken, Bertha Ratenoff Golant, Hugh Gottfried, Leo Gottlieb, Diane Dorothy Grant, Bruce Greenberg, Jim Gutman, Willard Hackerman, James Hartnett, Daniel Heisler, Irving Heller, Suzanne Hirschhorn, Eugene Holden, Harold Jenkin, Esther Kahn, Mary Kay, Barbara Klausner, Bertram Klausner, Harold Klein, Ernest Klein, Henry Kleinbard, Sam Kapolsky, Kenneth Krasno, Edna Kudin, Geraldine Lapidus, Roberta Levitt, Klaus Lefebvre, Minna Lester, Sherry L. Brown Levine, Corey Levy, William Helmut Lipman, Ann Loeb, Erwin Loebman, Byron Mandel, Molly Mann, Gloria Merrill, Marshall Mintz, Edward Mitchell, Andrea Moyer, Michael Nash, Mary Orland, Seymour Pensioner, Cecilia Renoff, Barbara Reskin, Nora Ruth Rubin, Wesley Richards, Hillis Rittenberg, Mary Rosemont, Lucas Rosenthal, Rhoda Ross, Sarah Lee Rudnick, Melba Ruth, Lou Savage, Avi Gross Schaefer. Frida Schreiber, Betty Shulman, Edward Schultz, Leonard Schwade, Kurt Seelman, Jack Sandowski, Len Chapoff, Carol Sherman, Gene Scheinfeld, Nelson Schrager, Norman Siebert, Alexander Smerling, Judith Smook, Art Sobin, Albert Spound, Alice Sugarman, Janet Kaminsky Sunshine, Boyd Sweet, Julius Tabak, Morris DeRicker, Sarah Tisherman, Gertrude Titleman, Craig Allen Tucker, Minna Tuller, Dinah Waller, Julia Weiskopf, Irvin Wixon, Georgette Yusufmer, William Zinberg. We bear in mind also the names of all of those who died in defense of the United States of America, in defense of the state of Israel, those who died through senseless acts of terror and horror, those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. We bear in mind now the thought of 22,000, and the number still climbs, of people who died in Turkey and Syria during that horrendous earthquake. If there are other names to be mentioned now, please speak their names aloud. Or in
Mr. Burt Bacharach. Sorry, Mr. Burt Bacharach.
Earl Terry.
Yitkadash, V'yitkadash,
Kadash, Shabbat,
Rabba,
Yom
V'yam
Devrei, Yotei, V'yam Li, Yotei, Hayom, Yom Echon, Hayei B'chol Beit Yisrael, Agalav Bismad, V'Krei, V'Yimron, Amen.
Yehishmei,
Yishmei Rabbam, V'Varach, V'Olam, V'Omei, Almayah, Yisbarach, V'Yishtabach, V'Yitpa'ar, Yaseh, V'Yikatev,
V'yikadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitallah,
Shmei Kedusha, Barichu,
Ve'elam,
Ela Mikol Birchata, Shirata,
V'shirata,
Shirata, V'nechemata, Zamiran V'yolma, V'yimron, Amen.
Hey,
Yesh, Rabba, Ben Shemaya, V'chaim, All Israel,
call
Amen.
Oh, Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom.
Ose Shalom B'Rama, Uya Aseh Shalom, Leinu V'Al Kol Yisrael, B'Imru, Amen.
Amen. God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace in our hearts, make peace in our homes,
Amen.
make peace in the household of Israel,
And let us say Amen.
peace among all the families and nations of earth, and let us say Amen.
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 Folks, thank you for
Thank
today.
you.
This was lovely. and
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom. My heart.
Shabbat
Eat a
shalom.
month.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom, Susie.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom,
Shalom,
Rabbi.
Susie.
Thank you. And Shabbat shalom to you. Beautiful week.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
It's gonna happen, Susie. It's happening already. It's really true. I can't say his name. Don't say his name. It's gonna be publicly announced later. I love you. Thank you for keeping my privacy. I love you.
Good week.
I gotta go.